Ain't gonna fossil fuel no more. Ain't gonna burn fossil fuel no more. Ain't gonna burn fossil fuel no more.
In the framing of this event, we are drawing on an event from the colonial past of this state, the Boston Tea Party. It is important to remember the harmful histories, narratives, and actions associated with that event. The appropriation of Native clothing as disguises, the role of the tea trade in the creation of the British Empire, the ensuing consequences for China, India, and other colonies, and of course, settler colonialism itself. We are borrowing the name as a powerful reference to an easily recognizable moment in history, and we want to prevent that history from doing further harm. With that, I want to dig into our rally today. And this rally wouldn't be possible without the enthusiastic support of our partners and co-sponsors. So thank you so much to Fix the Grid, Boston DSA, Slingshot, Mass Power Forward, No Coal, No Gas, Mass Climate Action Network, Energy Allies, Sunrise Cambridge, 350 Mass, Jewish Climate Action Network, and Climate Action Now. Thank you all so much. So we're going to kick things off with our first speaker, Gabe Cohen-Glinick. Gabe is the Lynn organizer for Neighbor to Neighbor, where he organizes with residents on issues ranging from housing justice to environmental pollution. So Gabe, come on up and join us.
Thanks, Mireille. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me here. Apologize, I usually like to read off of something printed, but I didn't have time to get to a printer, so. So as Mireille said, I'm the Lynn organizer for Neighbor to Neighbor. We're a statewide member-led organization, and we're building power in the communities that are being hit hardest by our extractive economy. We're fighting constantly against a system that puts profits over the well-being of people and the planet. A system built around stark lines of race and class. Our member leaders and thousands of other folks in our communities are grappling with the housing crisis on a daily basis. A crisis caused by these same profit-driven, anti-democratic systems. And at the same time, they're being further burdened by our dependence on corporately owned fossil fuels for generating electricity and heat. Electric bills have gone up more than 40% in some areas of New England this winter, and that's largely because of our region's over-reliance on fossil fuels. So many people we work with and talk to, from Springfield to Worcester to Lynn, are living with the stress of looming electricity shutoffs, utility debts, and having to choose between paying for electricity and heat or paying for the already unaffordable and rising cost of rents. We need to make sure we have an energy system that protects all ratepayers so no one is left in the dark. We need ISO New England to switch off the gas tap and make real investments in renewable, transparently, and democratically governed energy now. As we transform our relationship to energy production, we must center the needs, the voices, and the experiences of the people most impacted. And finally, in our governing, our creation, and our use of renewable energy, we need to create spaces and systems for deep democracy, community ownership, and community self-determination.
Mi nombre es Noemi Rodríguez y voy a hablar un poco acerca de los efectos del cambio climático y de las infraestructuras de combustibles fósiles no se sienten de forma equitativa. Las comunidades de bajo ingreso y las comunidades de color son afectadas de forma desproporcionada. Las personas y familias de bajo ingreso pagan un porcentaje mayor de sus ingresos en sus facturas de energía, por lo que sentimos los efectos de los precios más altos aún más. Y las comunidades de bajos ingresos y las comunidades de color, como mi comunidad de East Boston, siguen sufriendo la carga de infraestructuras energéticas peligrosas y contaminantes.
The impacts of climate change and fossil fuel infrastructure have not been felt equitably. Low-income communities and communities of color are being disproportionately affected. Low-income individuals and families pay a larger percentage of their income on their energy bills, so we feel the effects of higher prices even more deeply. And low-income communities and communities of color, like my community of East Boston, continue to be burdened by dangerous and polluting energy infrastructure.
Las gravosas infraestructuras energéticas y el peso emocional de elegir entre pagar facturas de luz y alimentar a nuestras familias afectadas a nuestra salud, y se nos cierran las puertas a una oportunidad que lleva energía limpia y fiable a nuestros hogares mediante paneles solares y almacenamientos en baterías.
Burdensome energy infrastructure and the emotional weight of choosing between paying energy bills and feeding our families impact our health, and we are locked out of opportunities to bring clean and reliable energy to our homes through solar panels and battery storage.
Nuestras comunidades no tienen asiento en la mesa de tomar decisiones en la ISO. Las decisiones sobre nuestro sistema de energía se toman sin nuestro conocimiento, sin nuestra capacidad de influencia.
Our communities are not given a seat at ISO New England's decision-making table. Decisions about the energy system are being made without our knowledge and without our ability to influence.
Por eso necesitamos expertos en la justicia medioambiental y participación pública en la Junta de ISO. Nuestras voces deben ser escuchadas y los intereses de las comunidades de justicia medioambiental deben ser proporcionadas en nuestra transición hacia energía limpia.
This is why we need environmental justice, expertise, and public participation at ISO New England. Our voices must be heard, and the interests of environmental justice communities must be prioritized as we transition to clean energy.
Los ejecutivos de ISO ganan millones de salarios anuales y sin embargo nos mantienen enganchados a combustibles que están causando aumento de los precios para los contribuyentes de Nueva Inglaterra. Necesitamos un operador de red que sea transparente y rinda cuentas públicamente para que podamos opinar sobre el destino de nuestro dinero. Gracias.
ISO New England executives make millions in annual salaries, yet they're keeping us hooked on fuels that are causing rising prices for New England ratepayers. We need a grid operator that's transparent and publicly accountable so we can have a say on where our money goes. Thank you.
So you've heard from Gabe and Noemi about some of the problems with our electric grid, the symptoms of the status quo, the rate hikes, the over-reliance on fossil fuels, the lack of public participation. None of those challenges that we're facing are accidental. They are the result of deliberate choices made by decision makers at ISO New England and other regional bodies to exclude ratepayers from the process and to put profit over people. They know that our region is not on the path toward the just transition to clean energy that we need. We're on the path that maximizes the money in their pockets by design. But we won't accept that black box of decision making any longer. We will break open the system and demand a seat at the table. The days of undue influence from fossil fuel executives are coming to an end. Our collective power and our unified voice create a beam of transparency and accountability that is shedding light on ISO New England's inner workings. They can't hide from us. We are the ones who pay their salaries, the ones who breathe the dirty air their power plants spew into our communities, the ones whose future is at stake. We are the grid, and it's time for ISO New England to start acting like it. We demand open, accessible public participation in decision-making spaces. We demand direct levers of accountability between ISO New England and residents through state representation on the ISO New England Board of Directors. We demand to not just be listened to, but to be heard. While we may not be electrical engineers and spew the jargon of energy markets, we are still experts in our own perspective and experience. We cannot afford to keep dismissing frontline communities, collective knowledge, and the public interest. ISO New England, open the door, because we've got things to say. Now I'm going to pass it back to Monty to highlight one particularly bad actor at ISO New England, their CEO, Gordon van Welie.
Oh, Murray?
Oh, you want me? Yeah.
This?
Yeah.
Just hold it this way.
Just let me know. Are you going to reveal it? Or?
I'm going to reveal it.
Great.
This man is Gordon van Welie. Gordon was appointed CEO of ISO New England in 2002. One of his main tasks was to oversee the transition from power plants that used oil and coal to create electricity to plants powered by natural gas. That transition happened rapidly in the period from 2005 to 2015. Coal and oil burning plants borrowed money and issued bonds to pay for costly conversions to gas. By 2020, less than 1% of New England electricity was generated with oil power, and just a handful of coal-based peaker plants were in operation. Now, during that time, as CEO of an agency that oversees the entire New England electric grid, Van Welie became a committed warrior for natural gas. He developed a tight relationship with power plant operators, helped them plan a profitable future by exploiting the advantages of natural gas. He became a spokesman for the natural gas industry, touting its virtues over all forms of power. In the process, he created a board of directors and a managerial staff that believes in and reflects the natural gas perspective. Unfortunately, natural gas is just the last act in a great fuel drama. And Gordon van Welie's great achievement has now become part of the dark side of the fossil fuel era. This is the dark side of the fossil fuel era. For years, ISO New England, its leadership, has promoted natural gas by words and by tilting the region's forward capacity market so that only natural gas can win in the bidding for power capacity. Since the Paris Agreement of 2016, ISO and Gordon van Welie have denied that climate change has anything to do with the electric power generating system. Fires in Australia and California, melting polar ice caps, and devastating droughts have not shaken their resolve. By the way, I drew this picture.
Very nice. What awaits you?
Help.
Even a New England winter with a 50% increase in electricity rates and fears that shortages of natural gas will lead to blackouts has not caused their devotion to waver. You can flip the picture again. When an organization, a corporation, a government, or a nonprofit proves itself to be trapped in an obsolete, harmful organizational strategy, the sensible response is to bring in new management, people with new ideas and a new way of approaching organizational challenges. ISO New England has failed. It is time for new climate-friendly leadership at ISO New England. It is time for Gordon van Welie to leave and help bring an end to the dark side of the fossil fuel era. Thank you all for coming today.
Gordon's gotta go! 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 Gordon's gotta go.
Okay.
Gordon's gotta go.
We have a little bit of a collective action to take. As you know, this event is called the Boston Tea Party, and we are standing next to the Boston Tea Party Museum. While we've been standing here, we've witnessed the reenactment of the tea dumping into the harbor a few times by some kids over there. So we are going to do our own dumping of high electric rates and fossil fuels. We don't want ISO New England's high electric rates that are in large part due to our over-reliance on fossil fuels. For this action, this is water-soluble paper that is entirely environmentally friendly. It will dissolve in about 15 seconds. I'm going to take some direction from our photographers for this.
All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. No more fossil fuels! No more high electric rates!
Let's hear it for all of you for organizing the Boston Tea Party. And I apologize for walking in at the last minute. I was on the other side of town advocating for rent stabilization and guaranteed housing for all people. And I think this is a perfect segue from housing policy to climate and energy policy, because they're all intertwined. We know that the only safe level of fossil fuel use and carbon emission is 0.
Yes.
And we know that, you know, we're pretty darn late in the game, so even when we get to 0, we have to do so much more at reforestation and so many other things. But, you know, on the topic at hand today, the truth is, you know, I'm a state representative, and I thought as a kid, you know, you get elected, you get to go to Beacon Hill, you get to make policy, you get to have a say. But the truth is, when it comes to ISO New England, when it comes to how our grid operates, you don't get a say, and me as a state representative and elected official, I don't really get a meaningful say, and no elected representation or appointees in our Commonwealth really get the level of say that they need. And so that's why we need to have the public's voice at the table at ISO New England. And, you know, on top of that, and I don't know if this is a little beyond the scope of our rally today, but I have legislation on Beacon Hill, and I firmly believe that we need public ownership of public utilities. And, you know, this is legislation I brought forward a few years ago, back during that disgraceful period when National Grid, a multi-billion-dollar corporation based in England, locked out the gas workers here in Massachusetts, wouldn't let them work just so they could extract profits. And so we know that investor-driven utilities not only are going to exploit workers, but they're also just thinking about profit. They're legally obligated to do that, and that can't be the mission of our utilities. The mission of our utilities has to be to actually save the potential for human life and all life on our planet, and that's how we have to organize our utilities. And I certainly think, you know, the topic of today's meeting here, the ISO New England, we need reform and we need real representation on our New England grid. So that's really why I'm here to stand with you. I'll check to see if I missed anything that, you know, I wanted to say. You know, we know we have some of the most climate forward policies in the country. And let's face it, we have a governor who has highlighted this, who has prioritized this, but now is really the time, not just for words, but for actual structural change. And so I just want to say thank you for organizing, for elevating this issue. As long as you keep showing up, as long as you keep standing up, I will continue to show up with you. I'll continue to stand up with you. So thanks for having me, and let's carry on. Appreciate it.
What do we want?
Clean power!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Clean power!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Clean power!
When do we want it?
Now!
I don't think ISO New England is equipped to respond to the pressures and the crises that we're now facing. You know, maybe this organization was devised in the past, but in today's climate, with the threat of climate change bearing down on us and with economic hardship all around us, we need a grid operator that's more responsive and that actually represents the public directly. My sense is when organizations like ISO New England were conceived, the stakes were probably lower regarding the grid. It was probably more of a technical thing. Whereas in today's climate emergency and with the economic hardships people face, the stakes are incredibly high. And so I think that's why it's time for reform. It's an evolving process of advocacy, and so I think that everything's part of the process. So I'm not going to hazard a prediction, but I think ultimately in the end, what we're talking about today will have an impact and will change the way ISO works.
Gordon's gotta go! Gordon's gotta go! Gordon's gotta go! Gordon's gotta go! Gordon's gotta go!